Welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, folks, I am in airplane mode. And now a man with several plans, a man who needs no introduction. How you doing today, my one luck friend?
I'm doing well. I keep waiting for you to say you are in hairplane mode because of your green hair, but you never do. How are you doing?
Good. Good to see PC in the chat. PC Michael Beverly reached out to me, so I wanted to say thank you because he mentioned that you told him we should collab, man. So I really appreciate that. We definitely need more mods out here in the street pushing collaborations. So I really appreciate that. So yeah, we're gonna get that set up and make sure we stay on top of it. Yeah, so today we're talking about navigating atheism while Black, and I think I got a real treat for folks because we're going to be talking about something that I didn't even know exists. As I say that, I'm like, I better check to see if it still exists. Yeah. Oh no, they still exist. Oh yeah, they've got a bunch of videos this week. They got a video from a day ago. But look, y'all, we're gonna be talking about Fox Soul.
Where'd you go?
Oh, I don't know what happened to him. Oh, this, you know what? This happens when we change views. He gets flipped upside down and all this other type of stuff. I don't know what happened. Your camera's upside down.
My camera's upside down?
Yeah.
I don't know how that can be.
Yeah, we got to get up. There it goes. All right, now it's better. But yeah, y'all, how many of y'all knew there was a Fox Soul? I didn't know nothing about
Fox Soul.
A Fox Soul, y'all. This is.
I have been unaware of this.
See, this is the ops. This is the ops out here. Well, what kind of sense does that even make? But see, I think this shows you what I've been saying though, that a lot of these Black Christians, they're really conservatives at heart. They really, I think there's obviously a bigger spectrum. Obviously, a lot of Black Christians vote blue, and I don't even know. I don't know what to make of a channel like Fox, so I can't even pretend to know what's up. I just think it's the Black wing of Fox News. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this because there's gonna be plenty to talk about. But yeah, how many of y'all? Let me know if you were aware of the Fox Soul channel.
However you decide to do it in whatever
soul order. Blame.
Define the differences between atheist, agnostic, skeptic.
Okay, so an atheist is someone who simply does not believe in God or gods and supernatural deities. A skeptic is someone who, they could be religious, they could be spiritual, they could be atheist. They're questioning. Again, they're challenging dogma and ideology. Did you ask about free thinkers?
No.
Okay, so
free.
And agnostics. I don't know if you want to expand on what agnostics are.
Agnostics is someone who says, I just don't know. It's possible, and they're not offering any sort of like definite no or yes. It's just,
I'm sorry to cut you. But you define yourselves as atheist.
Yes.
Okay.
Atheist, but I mean, atheist is a pretty big umbrella. So atheism can encompass secular humanists, those again that subscribe to a belief that morals, ethics, and justice emanate from human beings, not from on high, not from supernatural deities, not from Santa Claus, not from leprechauns, things that are not material. We also consider ourselves to be skeptics, again, because we're questioning and we're challenging dogma.
So are you a kind of materialist?
Scientific materialist, yes.
That's interesting.
All right, so pause tape. All right, so my one black friend, I don't know if you have any thoughts so far. Go ahead. I'll let you get started.
I like that he asked them to define terms. I think that's so valuable because then they can have the conversation on a level ground, right? One person isn't talking about something slightly different than the other. They know where each other are at, which is fantastic.
I think your mic is
Also,
fried. So for some reason, your mic all of a sudden sounds really weird.
Really? I've been using these. Hold on. Nope, they're on the proper ears. I don't know why. I did bring my earbuds, but you don't like my earbuds.
The blue ones. Yeah, a lot of times.
Yeah,
well,
let me
echo. Okay.
Let me switch it off and then switch it back on. I apologize,
All right.
ladies and
No
gentlemen.
worries. Hey, SWE, good to see you. Good to see you.
Switching it back on. Is this any better? Or did I just?
Yeah, it's better. It's better.
It is? Okay.
Yeah. It's better.
Anyway,
you haven't missed anything yet, Katina. Go ahead. Actually, he asked them to define terms, and they defined atheist, agnostic, and skeptic. And secular humanist.
Yeah. Well, that's my 2 bits on the.
So my thing is
that.
too.
I like that.
They it's just interesting to me that these terms are they feel very foreign to Black communities and like Black spaces, and it definitely feels interesting that you have to start with the basics. I also think part of this whole thing, at least I think from his side of this, is he's a Fox Black Christian, and so it's very interesting that this notion of materialism came out of him, because it's very much, to me, emulating conservative apologists, because I've never ever heard, like I said, I've never really heard Black folks speak honestly and openly about these concepts, and I doubt his ability to actually have an open, honest conversation about these terms. But I've never heard Black folks talk about materialism. But she was ready to handle it. But yeah, to me, it in a way shows something that I talk about, which is that these terms, these conversations, we only have because we have conversations with apologists, right? Like, it's only apologists who even think that that's a practical conversation to have when you first are meeting somebody.
So can I push a little bit?
Well, I ain't never heard of scientific materialist, so don't.
There we go.
That's a new one.
That's most of us.
I guess I have, I've been around people my whole academic career who had alternative belief systems and values, and some who were atheists. And one of the things that always fascinates me about atheism, particularly, is the certainty. And the certainty philosophically bothers me, because it's
not necessarily certainty. So again, when I talk about a big umbrella, some atheists who simply don't believe in, again, supernatural beings say, getting back to Siobhan's earlier point, we cannot prove this definitively. We cannot say definitively that there are not these supernatural things.
I don't know?
we don't know. We don't subscribe to, again, these supernatural deities as being controlling forces when it comes to determining morals, ethics, values, and justice.
All right. So I think what's interesting too is I have questions about his academic career. Let's just put it that way. But I find this type of thing that you often hear people say, especially religious people, talk about how they're around all these people with different beliefs. I actually think that in some sense that's not the humble brag that they think it is, because to me, it says a lot. Like you have to remember that people think that their beliefs is like the core to them. It's like the most important thing, and they have the real truth and all this other stuff. Yet you're around, people of all their and again, obviously we have to be for work and practical reasons. I'm not saying we actually shouldn't coexist. I'm just saying it's funny when people brag about it, because to me it really says that you don't take those differences of beliefs that seriously. Like you work for these people for 20 years, but you never really consider and it says something about how silly we think other people's beliefs are. Like we don't take them seriously. Like I don't go, oh, you're a Muslim, sit down, let's talk about it, because I'm maybe gonna change my mind. And then of course the fact that and it's probably this way about other religions, they can't represent it honestly. He's like super struggling. The first thing he says is, what bothers me with atheism is the certainty. Well, wait, didn't we just start by defining the difference between agnosticism and atheism?
Exactly.
And here you are conflating the two not 30 seconds later.
Well, I'm certain I don't believe in a God. I'm certain that the God claims presented to me, I don't view them as valid claims.
Well, that's the thing I was gonna say too, is like I'm different. Like most atheists don't express that certainty, because even though I'm agnostic too, like I consider myself an agnostic atheist, but I consider, well, I don't know, maybe, okay, it's really weird because I consider it agnostic in the sense that I recognize that I don't fully know, but I think that that's like trivial, and maybe in my case not even meaningful, because I'm so far on the certainty spectrum. Like I'm very, very, I'm as certain as you can be without knowing that there's no God. But I'm weird in that regard, and most atheists aren't that way. So if you truly,
I think that's unique.
was around
I think
other
that's a
people,
unique position.
if you were truly around other people like that are atheists, then you would know better than that if you listen to them, which suggests to me that he's either lying or doesn't listen, which both are very possible.
Yeah, I think that to be an agnostic to me makes more sense to me than to be a strict atheist, because to be a strict atheist to me anyway is, as some might say, as nonsensical as being a Christian.
No,
let's clarify.
We're saying belief.
So let's clarify.
Mm-hmm.
So an atheist just lacks the belief.
Right.
That's it. When you try to subscribe and attach other, ideologies to it, then you're taking it away from what it actually is, atheist, a lack of belief without
But the atheist
belief
lacks
of
the belief
God.
for a reason, though, right? Because they don't.
There's no evidence. I don't see evidence. When I see evidence, then I might change that belief. But until that evidence presents itself in a way that
Is that atheism?
Yeah, where's the evidence?
Pocket Locker, I almost think he's doing it on purpose now. I almost think I think he's doing it on purpose. Like what he's saying now, the stance he's taking. I think that is the stance of the audience, which often doesn't know or is unfamiliar with these terms. So I think
your mic's crackling again. But so I'm wondering if you're saying, are you saying that he's? I do think he's doing this thing deliberately, but I also think that's the perspective he genuinely is trying to represent. And this is a huge point of emphasis for me, which is the idea that Black folk are, these terms hit different, and they're more comfortable with the term agnostic than they are atheist. And it feels like he's feeding that. Like he's literally saying, I'm more comfortable with the term agnostic than atheist. And you know, that's like a real thing in the culture. And it's problematic because to me it means that it's far less accepted to say that you're an atheist or to be honest about your atheism. And that even when you do, people are going to try to push you into this agnostic camp. And it's very interesting because he says both things, which a lot of times people would see as a contradiction. He said both, I'm more comfortable with the term agnostic than atheist. And then he also said the term agnostic made more sense to him because, you know, it's like, oh, okay, I don't know. And again, it could be those two things are synonymous for him. In other words, what he means when he says he's more comfortable with it is that it makes more sense to him. But actually, I think as a Black novelist, at least for me, like I felt like the genuine contradiction. Like I felt like it was an emotional response, like the term atheist is icky to you. And then because the term is icky to you, you reach for an argument of why that term makes more sense to you. And I actually feel like both of those things are offensive in the sense of like, we trying to clarify to you what these terms mean. It's like Uncle Bobby says, let people that are in the club define the club. Like you shouldn't be telling me as an outsider, like what I should call myself based on what's more comfortable to you. And it's also super Christian apologetic-y to then turn around and tell me why you have a good argument, why I'm wrong about how I'm defining these terms.
Well, obviously there's I don't know if the audience is full of people, but there's definitely people in the audience, and either he is or he isn't, right? He is trying to sit in the chair for the audience, or he's doing that for himself as an interviewer, where he's trying to answer his
I
own
see.
questions and solely his own questions. By the way, because I own 10 of everything, I can log in on my iPad and plug this in and use the iPad's microphone if this microphone is bad. So I can do that.
It sounds okay right now.
Does
It
it?
stopped
Okay.
doing the roboting. Yeah, I don't know why it's coming and going or whatever.
Okay. I'll move my earbuds out of the way so that Bluetooth signal isn't trying to come from me.
All right, go ahead.
Go ahead, Pocket Locker.
Oh, I was just gonna say, as far as to where he's coming from, I think it's like all of the above. Like, I think he's sitting in the sense that he's a good host and knows who his audience is, and he's on Fox News or whatever. But I think he's also sincerely a conservative Black Christian, and I think also, you know, he's on Fox News and is going to do some deliberate and intentional, you know, reframing of things in ways that are consistent with what apologists would do, because he's not just a host and he's not just a conservative Christian. He's on Fox News and they're trying to push a very particular type of agenda. And that's actually kind of why I thought this was a kind of an interesting clip, because there's no doubt that it's there's no doubt that it's black. There's no doubt that this is sort of like almost like we didn't get to do black atheists versus black Christians because that stream got pulled. But this to me represents in many ways why it's so difficult for us to have these conversations. And I think there's ways where black Christians really do struggle to have genuine good faith conversations with black atheists. And I think this shows a lot of that, even though I'm certainly willing to admit that I think a lot of black Christians are not Fox people. Let's just put it that way. I still think, to be honest, they sound like Fox people when it comes to talking about their faith, and that I'll stand on. You may not be a Fox person politically, but when you start talking about Jesus, that this is a good representation of most of us, most of them. So, but that's my thoughts.
Okay.
All right, I'll go ahead and play.
So if I told you there's a purple unicorn living in your heart right now, you'd say, well, where's the evidence? You wouldn't just take for just the fact that I said it, that it's there. So you just don't believe that it's there. Period.
Well, I think your definition of atheism is quite broad.
Or maybe yours is narrow.
No, I mean,
hang on. What Chris said, the coexistence model with theists is more a list of topics we don't talk about, except what the theistic majority believe. The minority must remain silent. Yeah, it's that's I remember what we were talking about when we were talking about that, because we were talking about like how they boast about how they work with around a lot of different people, including non-believers, and yeah, there is a lot of that. There's absolutely a lot of that. Like when you have these groups, there's a lot that we don't talk about. Yeah, and when you have the minority opinion, you have to remain silent. And also there's a lot of there's a lot of just assuming that they're on the same page about a lot of topics. So, a matter of fact, I think that kind of facilitates it, to be honest with you. Like, maybe weird that this person's a Muslim or like a different denomination of Christianity or but they're probably with me as far as being tired of the woke. So at least they're not woke, right? That's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Yeah, have a long conversation with that. I think if you have a long enough conversation with anyone, you'll find what they're woke about. They may not be woke in the traditional sense, but they got some stories and they got some problems they want other people to solve, right? We can see how they've been hurt and they want other people to feel their pain. We can see it. It's just
usually
just
for
depends
them
on where the conversation
it's Christian persecution. All right, your mic is sounding fried again. Maybe you should try something else, because I don't know why it keeps happening. But yeah, go ahead if you want to try those. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, it says putting everything together. Enter my name. Sorry again, folks.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Yes, Katina, staying quiet to keep the peace. And it's something we all have to do in life in different situations. So I don't begrudge anybody for maintaining the peace at home or in their work life or anything like that. But it is definitely what we're being asked to do. And there's a lot of times when I don't think we necessarily should. Like it's weird. Like, I'll put it to you like this. Like, I definitely understand being in a family situation or a friend group or a club or a hobby sports team, something like that, or a workplace, like I said, where you know you do kind of keep quiet about certain things so that you don't make a lot of noise. But then there's times when things come up, right? What are we going to do about this policy or that policy? What are we going to do about some issue or something that's going on? You know, then a lot of times that's kind of when you got to speak up because they about to do something crazy.
Yeah.
It kind of just plays out that way sometimes. And that's kind of when you get outed. It's like, yeah, maybe I didn't know this about me, but yeah, I kind of don't want to go along with this religious nonsense today. Yeah, sorry. No, y'all didn't. No, y'all weren't aware, but
Well, hey, look, the diplomatic thing to say is, well, I think maybe we should study the true impact of that more.
Yeah, that's kind of, yes, matter of fact, that's kind of what people have to do. Yeah.
That, and people will probably never get back to it.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to stick to the issue. Yeah, that's but yeah, it's a real survival tactic.
That's
So theism. Okay,
let me finish.
Expound.
Hey, Bree.
That was unkind.
Great to see you, Bree.
But that's okay.
Well, I
What's up,
apologize.
Randy?
No, it's fine. It's fine because I'm trying to have a civil conversation.
Okay,
But,
okay, we gotta talk about this, and I'm gonna go back a little bit, y'all, just so y'all can hear this in context. But just watch this real quick. Just make sure I'm not tripping.
Sorry, Pocket Locker. Randy says he can't hear the vid.
Randy, you can't hear the video?
I hear it, but I don't know that the audience can hear it. If he can't hear it, I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah, if he can't hear it,
or if others can't hear it. Can any of you, anyone else not hear the video?
All right, it's coming out there, going through there. Can y'all hear the video? Yeah, that's the big thing. Let's see.
Lauer can hear.
Oh, they can hear it. They can hear it. Okay. Most people can hear it. All right. It might have just been paused or something, Randy. All right, so look, let me make sure y'all can hear this because I gotta make sure I'm not tripping.
Of atheism is quite broad.
Or maybe yours is narrow.
No, I mean that's.
So theism. Okay,
let me finish.
Expound.
That was unkind, but that's okay.
Well, I apologize.
So he was like, I think, that definition of atheism that they provide is quite broad because they had just said it's just somebody doesn't know. And then she says, well, maybe yours is quite narrow. And then he says, like, that was unkind. Did that hit y'all as unkind? Like, it hit me more like tone policing. Like, it hit me more like this thing religious people do, especially in conversations, especially when they're being challenged, where all of a sudden everything's about the aesthetic, everything's about how they're being treated in a person's tone of voice. I mean, literally, like, he came at her to me with the passive aggressive, because it seems your definition of atheism is quite broad, which is like, again, like, I hate to say it, but this is why I don't like talking about these definitions a lot of times. Like, it hit me like maybe there's a reason to talk about it, especially in front of a Fox Soul audience. Y'all know I don't trust nothing about this whole Fox Soul operation. But in general, there's a lot of times why I don't like talking about definitions because they act like they don't understand the basic definitions. And then we get hung up talking about them. And to me, this is not even reasonable to be, again, like if it was just like, let's just get these definitions up front so that we're all talking about the same thing and then we move on, that would be great. It's just these people never do that.
Well, he did that. He started by getting definitions. It's just
I'm saying as far as the moving on part, like he didn't do the now that it's been defined in an adequate way, let's move on. He did now that you defined it, let's pick apart the definition. Let's say, well, I don't like the definition. I wish you'd use this term instead of that term. Like he's doing, and then like we can't even get into the issues because we're still talking about what it means to be atheist or agnostic and whether we should even be using the terms atheist or agnostic, right? He's doing that whole thing. But my feeling is he really came at her with the kind of side jab, like, oh, I think your definition's a bit broad. And then she just said, maybe yours is a bit narrow. And then he gets to stop the whole conversation to say you're being mean. And that just to me feels like when they're losing or being challenged, like all of a sudden they're not being treated fairly. They're upset. They don't like a person's tone of voice. God forbid they mess around with me. Oh, I'm cursing. Oh, I used a bad word. I don't. Like that's pearl clutching the pearls. You know. Hey, Steph.
It's fine, because I'm trying to have a civil conversation, but we can not have one, but let's keep it civil. Your definition of atheism seems to be somewhat broad, because atheism, as I understand it, formally speaking, philosophically speaking, says that there is no God. Agnosticism says that I don't know.
No, that's not the
okay. That was also so good, because I'm so glad I paused before and pointed that out to y'all. Notice how it actually functioned in the conversation. It functioned in the conversation because he wanted to do his jab about her definition being broad. So when she challenged it, he claimed, oh, you're being mean to me. Why? Now he gets to make his challenge fully without being interrupted. But yeah, go ahead, my black friend, because I think you want to talk about the substance, the definitions.
Well, I think the lady in the video, to give her full credit, she's doing it now. She's correcting him. He clearly still had a misunderstanding that needs to be moved beyond, right? And again, I don't know that he's doing it on purpose, but to play the role of the audience who will get it wrong. If that is what he's doing a good job, because he's getting out of his guests the corrections. They're doing our work for us, right? In a way, he's doing the work for his audience. The guests are doing our work for us by saying, no, you misunderstand. We simply don't accept the claims that we've been presented with. It isn't necessarily a disbelief, an active disbelief in God. It's sort of, someone bringing you a tray of food you don't want to eat. No, take it away. Thank you, but take it away. It's not what you want. It's not acceptable to you. I guess that's even better. Not a God that we want, but a God that's acceptable. The evidence is not acceptable as proof of an actual God.
So you brought up how in a way, like he's doing his audience's work, they're doing our work. I feel like this is much worse for us than for them, because they're modeling what we know is just, and to me again, y'all, it's so basic. It's like 101. Like I want us to get into stuff that hits hard. And to be honest with you, in a 15-minute segment, we should be able to do that, but we'll see if we're able to do that. But one of the things that was interesting about what you just mentioned is I think that's what he's modeling. We talked about the roles he's playing, right? He's the host, but he's a genuine believer, but he's on Fox News and whatever. I think this is what they model for them. Like, this is how, in other words, he's modeling how to have this conversation in bad faith. Right, he's modeling, start by asking for their definitions. Okay, here's the definitions they're going to give you, because they will provide the genuine right definitions. Okay, but okay, we know there's this thing where, we challenge atheists and we try to get them to say they're agnostics instead of atheists. So here's how you push on that, and here's some talking points for that. Because you're right, I do think that's kind of the way this functions, and you sort of watch this, and then you're supposed to feel like you're ready to have this conversation yourself.
Definition of atheism. So the definition of atheism simply means no belief in gods. We're not subscribing to higher power.
Because there is no God, or because you don't have evidence for that there's a God?
It simply means no belief. So theism means belief in gods and supernatural beings. Okay, atheism is the opposite. So just think of it in those reductive terms.
But that's not how atheism practically functions in the world. I mean, I get the definitions.
That's how it functions for both of us.
That there is no belief.
No belief in gods as
but you're making my
omniscient,
point. But you're making my point.
omnipresent,
my point
creators,
is, if I may,
actors,
if I may,
architects.
if I may, my point is, I think that belief system is fine, but it has a certain certainty to it that I think doesn't make sense.
It's not a system.
But so I guess we're at loggerheads.
It's not a system. That's where I think he's falling down. And again, if he's playing the role of an audience, yeah, it's not a system. I go in and out, Pocket Locker, as to whether or not he is playing the role of the audience versus asking his very own questions. A lot of people make this mistake, as many of us in our audience and you and myself will know, of thinking that atheism is a belief system. They may indeed, I don't know how common it is for people to think atheism is a broad term. I don't think it is. If we want to, but I can see how it could be, right? Because I'll say any God I'm presented with thus far, any evidence I'm presented with thus far, I don't accept as a God defined. I just don't. And if 1,000 people came to me and they all had, different religions and they presented their gods to me, I'd say thank you, but I don't think this qualifies. So by all means, continue in your faith. You don't need me to rubber stamp your faith. I don't need to do that.
So to me, the reason a lot of us are here is because Christians are attacking atheism. They are very fearful of non-believers and the growth of non-believers. And so what's happened to me is I do believe the core of far-right conservatism in this country has always been bigotry, but it has always been wrapped in the flag, carrying a cross, hiding behind God's skirt. And so religion has been the core of that. And I think because it relates to what I think he's doing. So what I think he's doing is he's doing the stand-in for the apologist. And, he's supposed to be showing sort of the Black version of that conversation. And, I think that's even why you have that push. And why you have this genuine misunderstanding. It's like, because they can't allow themselves to honestly assess the atheist position, to take it and hear it genuinely. And that's also why you have them wanting to push you towards agnosticism. It's a couple of things. Part of it is they want to push you towards a softer term, so you're not taking such a firm stand against their God. They also want you to check a different box. And they also want to portray non-believers as confused. All of those things sort of make it better for them if you will say you're an agnostic.
You're making them more comfortable.
Yes. And on top of that,
that's not why we're here.
Right. And on top of that, if I can challenge that identity, then I can get away from the conversation about how I'm wrong. You got to remember, the conversation they're trying to have is, no, I'm a non-believer because we don't have the evidence. No, let's talk about the evidence. Where's your proof? They want to avoid that conversation at all costs. So it's, well, why do you use this term? Wouldn't it be better if you said this? I could get behind this or that. To me, it's very much what they do a lot of times when they find out somebody in their life is LGBTQ, right? They have all these questions. Well, is it a phase? Are you sure you're not this? Aren't you really questioning? You know, don't you think you haven't met the right person? They want to do all that because there's a certain amount of discomfort that they have with the issue.
Is because we're pushing back against the presumed certainty of believers. So,
which may not also make sense. That's my point.
Right.
That's my point. A Christian cannot, or a Muslim or a Jew cannot say, I can quantifiably prove that there's a God, right? Can't. Not scientifically.
I was going to say,
a Christian may say, I have experience, I have
all the time.
I have feeling, but that you can't measure taste. You can't scientifically prove that. I'm asking whether or not atheism falls into the same problem, because it has a certain level of what you call non-belief, but it doesn't know. It does not have special knowledge into the nature of the universe or into the nature of existence. No more special knowledge than as you would say Christians have.
Okay, but again, I think there's this false dichotomy being proposed. What we're simply saying is that there's no evidence, there's no empirical standard by which you can actually prove a negative, okay? Something that doesn't exist or something that cannot be empirically articulated. That's what we're saying. We're also saying is that we don't believe in that particular architect, agent, actor, intelligent designer, however you might want to frame it, as again being the arbiter of ethics, morals, values, justice, as being omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. Does that make sense?
To a certain degree. You said earlier that the Black community in Southern LA are saturated with religion and church. You don't feel as if, and I'm asking both of you, you don't feel as if religion, the Black church, has done any good?
So I want to say something about
that. This is a very interesting thing, and it's why so much of this to me is deliberate. And again, there's almost this coaching your audience and how to have these conversations in very problematic ways. And this is almost like a guilt trip for the non-believer. But hasn't Master Jesus been good to us? Hasn't the church been so integral to our history? We're trying to talk. She just tried to lay out very clearly, we don't think it's true. We don't think you have the empirical evidence. You know, we don't think it holds up to scrutiny. And he turns it to, but hasn't it been good for our people? Right? Like and you hear this so much as a defense of Christianity overall, about how it's been good for people, but you especially hear this in the Black community. And so I just want to recognize, because to be honest, they take the bait. Like they're like, oh, let's talk about that. But it's very important to note when somebody does something like that. And my response when this happens is, you can say what you want about the history, but that won't make it true. And that's the challenge that they don't want to hear. And I feel like I wish more atheists presented. You can say what you want about the church helping some civil rights movement or the progress towards freedom and all of this type of stuff. I have deeper scrutiny as far as the truth or validity of those claims. But more importantly is, even if that was the case, it just wouldn't mean that the religion is actually true. All right, let's see how she responds.
I do feel like a lot of times in conversations in atheist communities, Black atheist communities, there's this sort of, the church was all great, the church was all bad. And I'm always conscious and cautious, because I also see that as being a way to demonize Black people. As a way to demonize our history, to demonize our ancestors. My grandmother was brilliant. She was definitely religious. My grandmother was a riveter in World War II. She just recently passed away. as religious as she was when she had us in church and all those things, she was still a very active person. She was still she was a part of movements. So to me, I'm always conscious and cautious that we don't demonize our communities for being in the church. That's not a part of what I do. I don't even believe in that, because as much as we might have issues with things that occur in churches, or the fact that they don't pay any taxes, yet they take up a lot of commercial space, and I actually learned that from Moral Combat, Sakibu Hutchinson's book. Even with that, there's some other things, there are roles that they did play. As many issues as I had in my church, guess what? It was one of the few safe spaces. I'm from South Central Los Angeles, grew up there, born in the 80s, raised in the 90s. So I was there in some of the toughest times. That was the safest place for us to be when all those after school programs got shut down. That was the same era. That was also the only place where we got performing arts and public speaking training, was in those churches. A lot of our movements, abolition movements, civil rights movements, a lot of those were done in church basements. And so a lot of our attachment to that comes from that as well. But just because that thing might have helped us survive might not be the thing that helps us thrive.
I really, appreciated her comments there and appreciate what she said. And in addition to my thing about it not being the truth, I also want people to be more critical in their analysis. To me, churches don't pay taxes. So it's a very important point to note that, to me, churches never give really above and beyond what their tax burden would be. You know what I mean? Most churches, okay, yeah, they bring in hundreds of thousands. Most of these big churches bring in millions of dollars. And okay, they did a book bag drive for the kids, they have a little soup kitchen or whatever it is. If you look at what their tax burden would be, it's not even close. Also, when they do it, to me, it's like they do it because it increases their sales. First off, they're only doing it because it gives them further opportunities to evangelize and proselytize people. But it's sort of like reminds me of like when Subaru or something says, oh, for every Subaru you buy, we'll donate, $4,000 to this charity or whatever. Well, one, they already jacked up the price to compensate for that. But two, they only do that because that they're trusting that moral element to drive sales. Yeah. So it's crazy. And then again, like churches they're proselytizing people. So they just want to lie to people. The other thing that bothers me about this is then they turn around and they oppose the policies that would actually really help people. That's what people talk about when they say they want people to remain desperate and dependent on the church, because they won't actually support the policies that would increase our material living conditions to the point that we don't need these soup kitchens and every parent can afford to buy their kid a backpack full of school supplies and all this type of stuff. They want to support the policies, and matter of fact, they want to use a lot of the resources that they're taking from the people to lobby for policies that make sure people stay desperate, and then pat themselves on the back for giving people these little handouts.
Yeah, I was listening to some woman, and it's a shame I don't remember her name. I'd love to give her credit. She did a video on tithing and how much should one tithe, and she used the scriptures and the scriptures of the Bible, and she pointed out a verse that talked about how the Levites, the priests, weren't allowed to own property. The priesthood is their inheritance. And I'm working on my truck in my garage and I'm laughing my head off. And I said this, I've said it on Hot Program before, and every time I'm reminded of this, I pretty much go through the same set of emotions of like, this is the greatest con in all of religion. Say the priest, you can't own land, but instead of owning land, when God gets paid, so do you. When God gets fed, so do you. So priests You can have the most luxurious possible lifestyle. You can rent the place you stay, or you can stay in the temple. It doesn't matter because Israel's paying for it. Hebrews are lining up. They have to come from other countries just to give you their money so you can have a comfortable lifestyle. And it's supposed to go to God. I'm sure they did humanitarian things and fed the brokest of people and helped them out. But we can be sure they were extremely comfortable just mounting up wealth of gold and silver and animals. They couldn't slaughter them all, you know? So they could just own huge amounts of wealth. And yet the average person bringing them the money was completely unaware of what they were sitting on.
Yeah, and you see this in urban communities, especially. I mean, rural communities too. Just people are living in poverty and, you know, just struggling to get by. But you have these wonderful gilded churches. So and then a lot of times, maybe they can get it, but a lot of times the ministers and the leadership of the church don't even live in those communities.
They can afford to live elsewhere.
And I'll be honest with you, that
Exactly.
statement I might repeat in another context because we constantly stay in the survival mode. And so I think sometimes that's what these churches are benefiting from, taking from many of our communities, and some of them are not investing in our communities. They're taking up those spaces and not paying taxes. They're not providing the resources for the community, the job programs, the reentry programs. Some churches are. So,
what, if I may, what would you say to the churches? And I understand I'm asking you to talk to churches. What would you say to the churches who are doing those things? What value would you encourage them to continue to have?
I mean, constantly giving to the community is important. Also providing those resources, being active in policy changes. We're talking about, you know, also being active in making sure that there's economic investment in those communities, not just taking from the communities. You're not paying the taxes, so it's not going back to the community. So what are you offering the community economically? What policies are you pushing? What are you pushing for to advocate for the people of your congregation, but not only the congregation, but the community of which you sit, regardless of whether or not they go to your church, any other religious institution, or nothing at all?
Can a Christian be
I
a humanist?
disagree with her.
Absolutely.
I don't want the church making policy. I don't want the church making policy. I switched rooms, as many of you can tell where I'm broadcasting from. I don't have a Bible in this room. I'd have to use my computer. But I don't want the church making policies because they've had, what, like 4,500 years or something like that of policy making. And we can see the further we've gotten away from their rules, the better we've done as a society. I don't want to give them that power, and I don't want to encourage it. Now, as far as things she did say, like giving people a place to have a voice, learning to different learning opportunities as far as their education and individuals' education, performing arts, that sort of thing. All that is absolutely wonderful, and I applaud it. And I'd put my own $20 in the plate if that's what it was going towards, right? But I don't want the church saying someone can't have an abortion. I don't want the church saying that women have to be stay-at-home mothers. I don't want the church saying who you can sleep with, how much money you can make, where you can work, how you should dress. I don't want the church dictating any of that. I don't want them to have that power. Because it's proven again and again, we're just better off if they don't. Right? I don't want Sharia here in the United States.
Yeah, so this is where, you know, I gotta admit I was very encouraged yesterday watching Black Atheist Rants on Michael Beverly's channel. Again, shout out to PC for linking us up. You know, I just don't think there's anything to give the church anymore, right? I think it is because it's I think people like to toy with the notion of the seriously compartmentalized religion where somebody believes something, but it doesn't affect the way they treat other people, but then it also doesn't affect their politics, but they also don't have to take it literally to be like I don't know. I can't find a way to build a religion or Christianity I'd actually sign up for. I think at the end of the day, the transformation people seek through religion is something that will, especially because the religions we deal with currently tend to be sort of all encompassing.
Mm-hmm.
It is supposed to affect the way they treat others, the way they see the world. Also, ultimately, it's going to affect their politics. So yeah, I wish we could find more courage to really just tell them we've had enough. But even in the absence of that, I think it's good to just sort of go on without them. For them to see the world leaving them behind, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Obviously we know people who have left religion. Many of us are people who have left religion. If it was so appetizing, we would have stayed. Right? If there was enough there, we would have stayed.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I write to people on social media trying to correct their religious posts or tell them what's wrong with it, or say, yeah, but did you know about this contradictory verse over here? I offend a lot of people, and of course I get you should read the Bible. You may have read the Bible, but you didn't understand it. So what that is, that's obviously, it's not really a response. It's more of a reflex, right? My pastor can't be wrong. I don't check any of this stuff out, but surely my pastor has to be right. This meme really moved me today, and it spiritually elevated me. So the meme can't be wrong.
Right.
The person in the meme, right? This is from John MacArthur, one of the most miserable people on earth, but it's spiritual.
Right.
You know, Jesus would say, keep your name out my mouth if you met John MacArthur. But he's super well respected, and he's been around a very long time.
Yes.
So for some people, for millions of them, it's enough that he said it. If I could take John MacArthur's congregation and I could have them as an audience that's you're going to listen to these, just give me an hour and a half of your time where you'll listen to anything I'll play, or you'll watch any video I'll put on the screen. I would play them Alan Watts for an hour and a half. And I would bet you in a year, half those people wouldn't be Christians anymore, because they would realize how generic what they're learning is and that it isn't special. And part of what I play is how religions trick you, making you think you're getting more for your money than you really are.
Yeah.
And I would play for them how he talks about how it's just made up. It's just made up in a way to explain nature, in a way so that people could be better to each other.
Or at least that's the claim.
And they will learn as I did. Yeah, and they will learn as I did. You know what? I see some beauty here. I'll have that. I see some wisdom here. I'll have that. And so my food tray, if you will, is made up of things that I liked, right? My point of view is made up of things I liked.
Right.
And even hard lessons are rolled into that. Even hard lessons.
And see, that's how people join cults, right? I mean, that's when you talk to people inside of a cult, that's what they value. And that's what they brag of, right? It's the stuff that they learned, how much they grew, how they learned to treat each other as family, how they learned to let go of their materialism. Yeah, it is people pick the good out of it, but I always say that's That's the unfortunate part. That's why it's so uncomfortable, I think, for us to oppose it. Because like I said, you have to go at the thing which is hooking somebody. So if you have somebody in if you know somebody in an abusive relationship, when you talk to them about that partner, they're gonna bring up all the good things they do. Oh, they're a great lover. Oh, they're so good with the kids. Oh, they do. You, as the friend, have to shut that down. It's not that you don't appreciate those positive things that they do, is that you can't value the abuser. You can't go along with that narrative, right? So this is something Uncle Bobby talks about this, because that's the thing that keeps them there. That's the thing that keeps them subject to the abuse. And so I think the same thing about religion, but I genuinely mean, like, that's why it's tough, because the thing that keeps a person in the faith is, this is where I get my sense of community. This is where I get my sense of hope. This is where I get my purpose. This is where I feel good. And okay, and that's why they continue to be able to take advantage of you. That's why you continue to be subject to all of this terrible stuff. So yeah, that's the thing you unfortunately have to go after. Like, oh, you have to show them, like, this is how they control people. But yeah, it's definitely difficult. It's definitely difficult. So mommy said, I don't appreciate anything the abusers do. Fuck the good things. Yeah, that pretty much has to be our attitude about abusers. And I say religions, but I just consider them part of that class.
And scores of Christians who consider themselves to be humanists, and that they reconcile the adherence to supernaturalism, adherence to, religious and spiritual belief, with a belief that things emanate from human beings, justice, morals, ethics, that these two things absolutely interface with each other. And so just to reinforce what Siobhan has already said about the role of the Black church, I mean, as Black skeptics living in South Los Angeles, in conditions of extreme disenfranchisement, in conditions where, as she's pointed out, we don't have safe spaces that may not be faith-based, where we walk down the street and we have scores and scores of storefront churches that are struggling to survive, that are pulling in working class, lower income folk with programs, with initiatives, with things that are giving back to the community. They may be insular when they're doing this, but they are fulfilling some vital service that does not exist because we're in this hyper capitalistic, predatory, exploitive environment where a lot of our small business owners, they can't get small business loans due to institutional white supremacy and discrimination. So I think we need to look more holistically about the role that the historic Black church has played, acknowledge, as Siobhan has pointed out before, there is a paradox that exists, that these churches have played a very profound role in providing some avenue for socioeconomic enfranchisement and cultural relevance for African-American communities, but they've also been very corrosive, destructive, and insidious when it comes to queer, trans, and gender nonconforming, non-binary African-Americans, the HIV/AIDS crisis, preying on Black women and girls in the pulpit and in the pews. And we know historically African-American women have been the cliched backbone of the Black church. So these are some of the issues that we as Black skeptics, as Black atheists and free thinkers have really challenged in our movement, while also looking at the degree to which there are these white supremacist, very reductive notions about Black religiosity, particularly in the atheist, humanist, white-dominated movement.
No, what's interesting about that, that's a little clappy.
Hang on, y'all. I wanna hear that whole thing again. That was crazy. That was crazy.
Holistically about the role of the owners, they predatory when they're doing this, but they are fulfilling some vital service that does not exist because we're in this hyper capitalistic, predatory, exploitive environment where a lot of our small business owners, they can't get small business loans due to institutional white supremacy and discrimination. So I think we need to look more holistically about the role that the historic Black church has played, acknowledge, as Siobhan has pointed out before, there is a paradox that exists, that these churches have played a very profound role in providing some avenue for socioeconomic enfranchisement and cultural relevance for African-American communities. But they've also been very corrosive, destructive, and insidious when it comes to queer, trans, and gender nonconforming, non-binary African-Americans, the HIV/AIDS crisis, preying on Black women and girls in the pulpit and in the pews. And we know historically African-American women have been the cliched backbone of the Black church. So these are some of the issues that we as Black skeptics, as Black atheists and freethinkers have really challenged in our movement, while also looking at the degree to which there are these white supremacist, very reductive notions about Black religiosity, particularly in the atheist, humanist, white-dominated movement.
Okay, so there was, so much there. Hang on, I got my mic fucked up.
You have the crackle.
All right, so many things. First off, and I mention this a lot, a big part of the anti-LGBTQ issue we have in this country is based in people's religiosity, and this is especially true in the Black community. And I think this is a point that goes so overlooked. We owe ourselves walking away from religion on that single issue alone. And my feeling about it is, especially right now, things have always been bad, groups have always been discriminated against, but in this moment when there's just so much persecution of LGBTQ people, we cannot tolerate anything that pushes them further into the margins. And this is especially the case as people of color who have always been so marginalized ourselves. So on this issue, there is a tremendous crisis of solidarity that Black people continue to overlook the persecution of LGBTQ people. So that's tough, and I mean that. I feel that way about myself. I feel like myself people have heard me say this, but when I look back over my journey in my life, one of my biggest moral failing is not walking away from Christianity because of the way it treats LGBTQ people. That was one of the things where I wish I handled that differently. Also, the marginalization of Black women, the fact that the church has been used, the faith has been used so much in the oppression of Black people and also the oppression of women. And when you put those things together, as in all things, Black women get the shortest end of the short stick. And, we don't talk about that because, again, the culture is so steeped in the religion that again, you just don't talk about these things, and it's totally crooked, because the church wants to, again, take all this credit for the progress of Black culture and Black liberation and the civil rights movement and all of this stuff. But yet right now is continuing to preach to the vile that there's something wrong with LGBTQ. Most of the Black churches are anti-woke and which feeds right. They may not be totally as racist as other religious organizations are because they're Black, but again, they're usually anti-LGBTQ, and a lot of them are anti-woke just the same. And they continue to teach women about their place in the world and their place in the home and their place in the family, all that type of stuff. And then, of course, she touched on the way in which the atheist movement has just been so constructed and conducted in a way that privileges white men all over again. And there is the need for Black free thinkers to do more, because the very notion of secularity itself is being colonized right before our eyes. All right, that's what I got off the dome.
Okay.
Did you have stuff? Or I was saying over there taking notes.
No, sharing your thoughts
Okay.
on that. I just, again, I already spoke about it. I think the church should have a limited reach, and I mean a very limited reach. I don't think the church has anything to do with politics, or should have nothing to do with politics. The fact that there are policies in place to forbid churches from taking a stand politically, I think is fantastic. But I'll say, or I guess that has to do more with endorsing candidates, but I'd say public policy, no, they don't get to determine that. I mean, I've already said that. It's one thing if you want to encourage the people going to your church to have a particular thought process about making some very difficult decisions in their own life. But I don't think the church should have any control over anyone's life at all, because they've been screwing it up for thousands of years. Do they get it right sometimes? They sure do. Do they get it wrong, horribly wrong sometimes? They sure do. Child abuse is still in the church after all this time, right? God's watching,
Yes.
and I'm going to borrow from Christopher
Yes.
Hitchens, with folded arms.
Yes.
He's watching it. I'll borrow from Tracy Harris.
And
He's
even
not going to do anything about it until they're done. Then he's going to punish them.
And even more so in the Black community, because there's less education. And so because there's less education, there's less conversation about sex education and sexual health and mental health and consent. And there's less conversations around abuse. So there's more normalization of abuse overall. Also, somebody made a good point about capitalism. It was Liz Allen. You know, the churches, again, continue to support the capitalist policies. And that also has to be, it's why it's like, come on, like, I don't even, like, talking about, if we're going to talk, all right, let's say this. If we're going to talk about your contribution to history, then let's talk about your contribution to history. It doesn't say a lot if you were the center of activity when you were literally the only place people could have activity. And that's the history. That's the history of the church. The church doesn't have.
That's a very powerful point. That's an
It doesn't,
extremely
right?
powerful
It doesn't have an intellectual legacy of being super forward thinking. No, it was just the country really, really hated black people. And again, let's be clear about this. Let's be clear about this. The only reason that black people were encouraged to convert to Christianity and their religiosity was encouraged was because that would make them better slaves. And that would make them less likely to revolt. And that same ideology continued even past slavery when it came to they'd be less likely to be revengeful and less likely to be agitators as they were, trying to get their rights and all this type of stuff. So it's never been, and this is another thing I want to bring up, and y'all gonna hear me when I say this, because there's something I haven't said a lot, but needs to be said. Black people have always used religiosity, in particular Christianity, to audition for full citizenship, and it's never worked. Let me say it to you again. Black people have always used Christianity to audition for full citizenship, and it's never worked, right? Take it back to the beginning when there were laws that said, who you could enslave was determined based on your religion. You couldn't enslave other Christians. Well, when they started trying to enslave black people, what did those black people do? Many of them converted to Christianity. Did the people say, oh, damn, them black people are Christians, let's not enslave them any longer? No, they changed the law to be you can enslave based on race instead of religion. And ever since then, it's like when they use religion to make us better slaves, black people were not using the religion. They thought that would give them some humanity. It would make them see them as people. And it's never worked. To this day, I guarantee you, if you'd have picked George Floyd up after 8 minutes of standing on his neck so he probably didn't die, and asked him what his religion is, a black man in America, is a really good chance he'd have said Christian. How many black men have been shot to death that would identify as Christian? This is what. So you got to understand that part of it too, y'all. So that this is why it's always been a bad compromise, okay? And so now let's take it back to the role of the church in history. So you have the fact that our religiosity has always been a fool's errand to begin with, but literally that was the only place we could have agency. But then when you look into the content of it, just like the white church, the black church has just always been on the wrong side of history and remains so to this day. And so, yeah, it's a great point about capitalism. Appreciate y'all. I'm going to let it roll because I got more to say, but we're going to get into it.
No, what's interesting about that, that's a little clappy, so y'all should clap for some of that.
A little clappy.
Because,
Appreciate you, Rob.
I'm a spiritual person. I'm a religious person. So we have that not in common. But what we do have in common is the withering critique that you have about religion and about the black church particularly. We have that in common, because I think much of what you just said is a lot of my angst as it relates to religion and to the church. The church, black church particularly, has been awful as it relates to LGBTQ issues, women, everything you just said. is enough to drive somebody to being a damn atheist.
It should be enough to lead. There you go.
Because and I'm not trying to be flippant.
You don't get it though.
Emphasize the fact
He said it.
but I'm trying to model, that you can be a part of a tradition, right, and have serious skeptical assessments of it,
right?
To have a withering critique of it, and I think most people watching the show have this either one thing or you're another kind of view of this conversation. And in my own personal life, that's not the case, because in as much as I grew up in the church, and I have a love for the church, I understand what the Black church, the Black mosque, and the Black synagogue. I understand the deep inadequacies that have come along with that.
Right.
Let me ask you a question, and again, this is for you, because I've read this in one of your articles.
This is also so weird. Like I don't know why people do this. You're part of a group that discriminates. I need Christians to understand this. Stop trying to dance around this.
That's an excellent point.
You know, you're part of the group, and it's in your book. It says it in your book. You know, if somebody said to me, I'm part of the KKK, you just assume they're racist. Why? Because that's what that organization means. When you look at the history of the persecution of people in this country, they haven't, you know, they get their own little special chapter because they've been a part of it. Christianity has just been a part of these groups, and it has doctrines that are oppressive to these groups. They claim it's in the holy text. So, and this notion of I have critiques, they're lying. What they do is when they get around certain people, namely either marginalized people or the few people that'll talk about issues of marginalization, is they'll portray themselves as allies. They'll portray themselves as on side. Oh, I don't like that part of it. Yeah, that's a real shame. Yeah, no, I have critiques of it. I guarantee you, not a single time in his entire life has he in any meaningful way critiqued or done anything about any type of bigotry in a religious organization at all. I guarantee you none of these people ever have. None. They never. They've never spoken out about a bigoted sermon, pulled somebody aside after they said something fucked up in the church, critiqued their bigoted uncle. None of it. They've never done any of that. And again, it's just a shame that it feels to me all I'm doing is saying out loud what everybody already knows, because that's the point we've gotten to, where we can literally expect failures of allyship from these people, and they are consistent in that way. And what I think is important is that we stop letting them have the double speak. Like you, you know, like fine, you can stay a Christian because that's what means the most to you, but you don't get to pretend that you're doing something about the problems in your religion, because you're definitely not. The other thing that drives me crazy about this is it gets at this conversation we've been having in our spaces about debate. Is it even worthwhile to have these debates with these people? It really seems like it's not. Part of that is because they're not there to exchange ideas. And there's the issue of platforming. This shows you have the same issue with conversations, especially public ones. Because even though a lot of us think, oh, if we just have conversations, we're doing something we're doing something meaningfully different than a spectacle debate. But to be honest, these spectacle conversations are really just spectacle debates with a different structure. And so while I too value the genuine conversations, like there's people we've talked to on his channel and I really have appreciated the conversations with them. They're few and far between. And what you got to be, you know, sort of on high alert about is people like this who are actually using the conversation and actually just filling it with debate talking points and modeling for other people how to not listen. Right, because that's the issue here with this dude. This is a bad example.
I'd say let's let him continue.
Yeah, we're almost done.
Okay.
Christian fascism. And I think it relates to what you just said. Could you expand on it?
So that's a term that I trot out, particularly as it pertains to the white Christian evangelical fundamentalist movement and the way that that movement has totally hijacked women's rights, access to contraception, access to abortion, access to health screening, with all of these extremely pernicious laws that have been passed in state legislature after state legislature, particularly in the Midwest and in the Deep South. And as you know, I mean, we are in a white knuckle battle with them, with these Christian.
Super chat, 100 Mexican. Thank you so much, Michael. That's incredible.
Many
hey
thanks,
there, debate only for the audience. I think the person isn't going to do anything but double down on their beliefs. That said, personally, I don't like debates. I like conversations. Yeah, I've definitely I'm definitely the same way. And like I said, I have had some conversations with people, even on YouTube, that I've really valued. And I've also you know, for a while, even as an atheist, I was still participating in churches. And you know, being a worship drummer, and so I had some really great conversations with friends at the time, that continued even like during the pandemic, like when I stopped playing, and you know, they were working through a lot, but they were genuine, right? They were always like, I'm trying to understand where they're coming from. They're trying to understand where I'm coming from. We're exchanging things. We're, you know, it's a serious endeavor between parties that respect each other. I think this type of conversation is still, I think, a better thing than like a debate would be. Like if they set this up as a debate, like that would be even worse. So I definitely think even in this setting, the conversation is preferable to the debate. But I do think there's a way, especially when you're, because I you know, we are technically watching something Fox affiliated, where a conversation like this is, you know, gonna get laced with a lot of the debate talking points, and that's just because of who you're talking to, right? So yeah, because even a lot of the stuff we've been dealing with recently in our community, Michael, especially like these our smaller channels, a lot of times the worst people show up, and sometimes they're calling out people because they want to debate, but a lot of times it's like, no, let's talk. They want to have a conversation, and they're just as toxic.
Well, I want to say, go ahead.
Yeah, please do. No, go ahead.
To Michael's comment, when it is a conversation, you can be patient. You can address, you can avoid the gish gallop often, and you can address points one at a time. And the person can truly feel you're listening and you can truly feel being listened to as well. So conversations are often far superior to debates where one person is just trying to prove to you that they're right. Did I just say the thing backwards? Conversations are far superior. Yeah. So in a debate, a person just might be trying to prove themselves, but in a conversation, it's easier for that person to be challenged because you can confront them Socratically and get them to answer questions. Yesterday, I found out something about one of my neighbor's kids. And I said, do you mind if I talk to her about that? Like some behavior I didn't think was too helpful. Now she's 3.5. So I had a long conversation in the presence of the mother and the younger brother about what this kid was doing. She said almost nothing because she knew she was wrong. and because I love their family, right? I love them all. My focus was to get her to see that there was a better way that didn't involve the behavior the mother didn't like. She can still be herself. This little girl can still be herself and just change this one aspect out for good behavior. That's it. When you have a debate, you can't do that. When you have a conversation, you can. You can ask the religious person, in your opinion, would it be better if this particular aspect that your religion holds up as the preferred way, would it be better if we actually made it even better by not doing that and substituting this instead? That person that person's going to do an evaluation, right? On the spot,
Yes.
do an evaluation. And they have to present you with an answer. If they say no, they may justify their reason. Now that could be helpful to you because maybe if you were looking at it wrong, then now you're edified. You learned something. But they may say, well, yeah, I think you're looking at this wrong. However, your point is not totally wasted because this element over here could be refined. Look, we can improve Christianity tomorrow by if everybody who was an abuser stopped abusing. It's instantly improved. It's still not in my opinion, it's still not the best.
Yeah, you know me, I'm already like, it's still not true. It's still not true, but it's definitely better.
It would be better. I do worry because I've obviously people can use the Bible divisively. As I have said, religion is useful. After someone is saved, it says they don't sin. Well, does that mean after someone is saved, if they went out and they robbed a grocery store, it's God's will that they robbed the grocery store because that person's been saved? So now they're under the governorship of God, and they'll do whatever God wants or tells them to do, and God compels them. The book of Revelation talks about these world leaders will be compelled to turn control over of their country. They don't get a choice. It's just something God will make happen.
Yeah. Michael, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Given direct Socratic questions places a burden on them. They do reflect, ignore, justify, or they can do some real self-reflection and actually answer. Yeah, it's tough. I was gonna say they exist. They definitely exist on a spectrum, and so a conversation can change. It can start as a debate and turn more into a conversation, or start as a conversation and turn more into a debate. I think you see that happen a lot on call-in shows, where sometimes it's deliberate. Sometimes a person calls in, well, I just kind of have a question and I'm just wondering, and like before you know it, like 5 minutes later, they're like yelling and being all hostile or whatever. But yeah, it just it definitely happens, and also there's a huge difference whether it's public or not, whether it's online or not, whether it's being recorded or not. Typically, I think the best conversations I've had have been like over lunch, right, with a friend, you know, in a cafe. Like, that's why I think something like Nitty's thing, like where he takes a sign and goes around in the coffee shop and it says it's best to be an atheist, and then the people that are talking to him, you know, they're actually the people that approached him about it. You know, like that was the other thing that was like helpful, you know, in talking to some of my friends who went to church, was like, you know, that was something they wanted, you know, that was something they wanted to do. So that's definitely a game changer. Yeah. Hope you're having a great one. I really appreciate the super chat. It's super awesome. It's definitely very, very generous of you.
And Sumami, I like your comment. Self-reflection is not the friend of the Abrahamic believer. I think that can often be true.
Yeah, it's
definitely.
It's really tough. I struggle with it. You know, because on one hand, people are victims, and I struggle to remember that. People are, a lot of times they were brainwashed into this as a child. I think that's probably the most common case. Other times it could be, you know, something that happened or something they were going through or a personal experience they had, you know, lots of different reasons, but a lot in all cases, I think they were taken advantage of. But there's also the way in which, as adults, they're now the perpetrators. They're now the people who are spreading the religion. That's another thing I wanted to mention, actually, that we're not often, I don't think, honest enough about in these spaces. These people are proselytizing. Okay, it's obvious when a blessed be he or a troll comes through chat and is like, "You have forgotten his fire. He, you know, do not forget his grace." You know, whatever. Like, you're like, all right, okay. You realize that, but you forget that the person who wants to come in, the person who calls the call-in show with the question or whatever, that honestly, a lot, like more times than not, they're trying to proselytize. And we definitely forget that the fool that wants to sit up here and talk about, are you a materialist? What's your epistemology? What's the axiology of the ontology of your whatever? Like, their actual mission is to spread their nonsense. And we often sometimes like forget that they have a very active agenda, just like this person here does, right? Like, you know, ostensibly, again, it's that, oh, look, let's just sit down and converse with atheists. And this is what I meant about them attacking atheism. Like, they're very insecure about atheism because, again, of how much religion is the core to their entire worldview, including their economics, their politics, the way they do relationships and the way they understand humanity, all of that good stuff. And so this is part of their strategy, right? I'm gonna be honest with you. This is a highly constructed attack on atheists that we're watching right here. We're literally watching an organization that constructed a situation of, let's bring some atheists on so we can show how to talk to atheists, interview these people in the studio, like broadcast it and like put it on the web, like just so they can show people like how to not listen to atheists. Right. So it's very strategic. It's very deliberate. All right, let's let them wrap up.
Fascists to ensure that particularly working class women of color have equitable access to reproductive health and reproductive justice.
All right. I love that at the end she brought in Christofascism. One and it's just a shame that that's when they were like, yeah, and we're out of time. Let's get up out of here.
And we're clear.
And because that's the thing that another thing that Black folks don't want to talk about, and especially if you want to talk about your influence in the history, your influence on the culture, like you got to take responsibility for that. And even right now, that's just what it is. So a couple things. If you're in America and you're a Black Christian, you are worshiping white Jesus more or less. You could look, I know I've seen the pictures where you depict the Last Supper and everybody's African, and you give each other the little figurines where Jesus is black or a little black manger scene and all of this nonsense. Okay, but have some of your white friends over and ask them to bow their heads before supper in front of Black Jesus. It's not gonna happen. It's just not gonna happen. They're gonna let you know exactly how silly that is.
I have to jump in here because I love
Go
saying
ahead.
this so much. If archaeologists ever proved that Jesus was a Black person, Christianity's over. That's the day. That's the day. It's over. You could literally prove that the priests were using drugs when they came up with prophecies and stuff like that. It's going to continue on at a pretty good clip. But the moment Jesus becomes a Black man in history, they're done. They're done. Yeah. The Klan's going to have one last meeting about where there's a prayer said, and then that's over for them too.
So this and also like Black affirming Christianity is not Christianity. So even like if you're part of like if you're ever in like a white, predominantly white evangelical type of Americana church, right? A lot of times, okay, I'm about to keep it so real. A lot of times, the absence of certain religious practices, like why they don't speak in tongues, why they don't prophesize, is because they associate those practices with Black churches. And the same way in political spaces, Blackness gets coded as pro-Blackness gets coded as divisiveness. In these spaces, Black traditions get coded as quote unquote charismatic. And they basically treat it like worshiping in ways that are uniquely associated with Black culture is not proper worship. And that those churches are really just, I hate to say this, a bunch of jungle bunnies running around throwing wigs and slapping on tambourines and speaking in tongues. Now, you do have white Pentecostal churches that do all of those things, but other white congregations look at them as doing those same things. In other words, those are the N-word lover churches. And still they speak down upon their practices and traditions. And if you know what's up, you'll be able to recognize that it's proximity to Blackness. It's just so apparent. But nevertheless, when Black people proclaim themselves that Jesus is Lord and they're diehard Christians and all this type of stuff, especially because that really predominantly interacts outside of church, right? If you think about it, a lot of our communities are super segregated. churches are even more segregated. So when black and white Christianity mesh, it's not typically in church, right? It's in the world. It's in the grocery store. It's at work. It's whatever, right? And so to the extent that it's accepted, it doesn't get coded as support for some black affirming Jesus's hair was skin of bronze and hair of wool, and the Christianity really comes out of Africa and all of this type of black. No, it doesn't get coded as that. It gets coded as you believe in the same type of Trumplican Christianity that these right wingers do. And I hate to say it, but like a lot of black Christians are on the same conservative nonsense. Again, they have very strict ideas about a woman's role in a home, in a relationship, in a community. Very anti-progressive ideas with regard to LGBTQ people. And I'm talking about even the ones that claim to be allies. Even the ones that claim to be allies will say, well, oh, I have gay friends, or I have gay coworkers and I don't have a problem with them, and da 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 da. To be honest with you, they still think it's wrong. What they're really saying is, I think it's wrong, but I don't want the smoke, so I'm hands off. That's not for me to deal with. You know, I just accept them the way they are. I just deal with them as they are, and it's up to God to, you know, da 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 da. You know, and again, that's we don't, you know, it's like most of my trans friends will say, like, we don't need allies, we need accomplices. And a person like that is never going to be your accomplice, because again, at the end of the day, they do think it's wrong. They just want to let somebody else do the dirty work. So it's just when you start putting these things together, this notion that the church is somehow necessary for black progress and black liberation and all of this is crazy. It's very clear that it holds us back, and it's very clear that even though a lot of these people are black Christians, at the end of the day, they are supporting the Christo-fascism that at the end of the day is anti-black to its core.
Well, I think self-reflection is good. Michael already pointed out that how harmful that can be to maybe someone's ego, if I want to rephrase what he said. So I guess the best thing we can do is just challenge people. If someone thinks like this or that behavior is wrong when it's really just biology at work, and it's medical science at work. I'm a person with a lot of stuff going on medically. I'm real thankful that there are medications I can take, that procedures have been developed to help me with this or that. Well, in the Old Testament days, I probably would have just dropped dead a couple of years ago. You know, August 6th, 2022, probably would have just dropped dead. Back when I was in Anguilla, you know, with diabetes, not even knowing I was diabetic, I probably would have just dropped dead. But no matter how many people are praying for me, wouldn't have helped. But to get some medical professionals in there that knew what they were doing, that's real useful to me. Multiple times. When someone is making the decision to improve their life, it will almost always, right, improve the lives of those around them, because we get that person's authentic self and they can truly be happy in who they are. And it hurts to see someone we love or even just like be miserable, regardless of the reason. Well, if the reasons are fixable, how can you throw stones at such a person or their process?
So I'll say this too, to be fair. Well, I see what happened. I hit the fader. Okay. So when I will say this, a lot of it is cultural. And I think to be fair, Black Christianity exists kind of in a bubble the way white Christianity does, which I mean is so many white folks are, whether they live in suburbs, whether they live in rural conditions, they live in places where there just aren't a lot of Black people. And so there's very limited ability for them to have cultural exchange. And I think the same thing happens for Black people. Like, that was the one thing that was very interesting about like growing up for me, because it was like oscillating between those two worlds, right? Because I grew up in the suburbs, the only Black kid in all white school. Even now I'm accepted largely in all white spaces. But like, when I went to visit my family, like my family was in a world where wasn't a lot of white people. It's just like, like urban communities where, everybody Black. So it was like going between the two bubbles. And so I say that to say it's important to note that I don't think the anti-Blackness of the average Black Christian is deliberate or intentional, or necessarily even something they're cognizant of in their situation. It's more what it feeds into in the bigger picture, which you have to step back to take it to see, and they can't do that. Right. So like, so like that's I think that's like an important distinction. Like, I don't think they're doing that on purpose. Also, I think it's another good example of how, like I said, how Black people have always used Christianity to audition for full citizenship. You see where our communities are super religious, but they're still super neglected. It's like I see a church on every other corner around here. I see people's houses don't look, y'all, maybe they got nice cars to drive to church on Sunday and nice suits, but this community not nice. Our streets ain't paved, and they not taking care of code enforcement around here like they do other places. It's like, it's weird. You would think if they recognize all these good Black Christian folks lived over here, our neighborhoods will look more like their neighborhoods, but that's not the case. So, and then the other thing is the capitalism of it. There's a way in which, I don't know, I've been to a lot of Black churches, it's not just the mainstream capitalism. There's an extra layer that's like it's like a hyper gospel of prosperity. This idea that God wants to bless you, and if you are blessed, you will be blessed by material things. You see this just even in the church, the way like the pastors always have the nicest of everything and the nicest suits and the nicest cars and lives in a nice house. You also see this in like the way celebrities are treated. Like, celebrities are treated like they must be the holiest of the people in the church because they're the richest. And then there's a way that everybody else sees how they're treated. And so it makes it like what you really aspire to is that wealth, right? Because that's what gives you that status. I don't know. It's a lot, y'all. It's deep, but it's very it's almost like hip hop how materialistic it is in church. Go ahead.
I would like to speak to the celebrity aspect because I'm in Los Angeles. So when I was volunteering for the parking ministry, we would be told, oh, I'm going to say her name. Meg Ryan's coming today. Make sure she gets a nice parking space. Now, I thought this was silly. Like, okay, look, this lady is coming here not for superior parking. That's not why she's coming. And whatever. We made sure there was a good space. So when she indeed showed up, and I was one of the people who noticed that she was in this SUV, like, yeah, ma'am, you guys can park over there. That's all it was. And I don't know if they introduced her on the inside. I doubt it, because I think I'd only seen them do that to like politicians. They introduce politicians. But so often, pretty much probably every other week, I would see somebody who was a celebrity there. Almost always they were extremely approachable and very kind. And I would see people talking to them. And I kind of would just keep my distance for the most part, unless I just bumped into them. Like Christina Applegate, I saw Shaka Khan and Layla Ali. You know, I saw them in the hallway. So I just said hello. You know, it wasn't like a big thing. You know, I didn't try to get to know them or anything like that. But you can see, or I could see in the parishioners, there's like a halo around that celebrity, because it's as if the presence of the celebrity legitimized everything else that went on that Sunday.
Yes.
Their success,
so Michael,
maybe, or fame, legitimized the message, legitimizes believing in the message. Interesting. And good parking, evidently.
So Michael with another super chat, 50 Mexican. Thank you so much, Michael. Again, it's crazy. We just got monetized, and I forgot to even remind people that I got the channel monetized. I'm always forgetting, and so I really appreciate that. Wealth equals blessing from the Father, and not having wealth and struggling equals you're doing something wrong, sinning, or otherwise. It's an ugly theology. Yeah.
Oh, Michael, God chasteneth who he loves. That's how you know God is working out your salvation with fear and trembling. Come on. So it can be spun either way, Michael. It can be spun either way. And that's when the person knows their blessing is coming. Yeah, after you're done feeling like garbage and something good actually happens, then it's awesome. I came up with a word yesterday, Pocket Locker and Hot Program audience. I'd like to share my word with you. The word is uncrappy.
Uncrappy?
Uncrappy. Uncrappy is when things have been going wrong and you've been feeling like crap, but suddenly the tables have turned a bit and you're starting to feel encouraged and inspired and feel better. So that's uncrappy. So feel free to use this in your daily life when it applies. How you feeling? I'm feeling uncrappy. And things were crap. Now things are better. Uncrappy.
Yeah, uncrappy. Yeah, well, that's and to be honest, this has always been the thing. So first off, I think the faith is inherently materialistic. Like, you can't tell me that the notion of heaven or eternal life isn't the ultimate form of a prosperity gospel. Like, that's the final prosperity gospel. It's the final boss of prosperity gospels is the doctrine of eternal life. So, you know, it's all fruit of a poisonous tree, and it's all very inherently selfish. But yeah, there's a way in which the actual practice of the church, because, and I say this because people, I think, in the wider atheist community are hip to the gospel of prosperity. Like, they know what that means. And they recognize it as a unique thread of like problematic evangelicalism in America. I just think you'll see that even more highlighted in the Black church in America. And also what you'll see is even part of it is a lack of veneer of other stuff. Like there's just so much of that. Like there's just right, because part of it is it's a very the belief is that the preaching and the gospel teaching is very pragmatic. It's very much people are going through things right now. People are having a hard time. And so they need in church to be encouraged, right? And there's very much that is forward, as opposed to, I hate to say it, churches where there's just a lot less struggle amongst the parishioners. And so a lot of times there's something that the pastor really wants to make a big theology point about, or he wants to have a sermon series about some book because of a thing he got in seminary, right? There's you know, or a lot of times theology, like he's learning something about high Christology, and right, there's all this stuff that might be on the preaching agenda. And when you believe that your preaching very much needs to feed your people week to week on a pragmatic basis, your message tends to focus on God wants to heal you. He wants you to get that job. He wants to find a way to help your kid get through college. He wants to help your back not hurt anymore. And then there's also, again, there's a lack of a lot of times formalized education. So you have fewer preachers who have gone through some crazy seminar where they're going to get like a super intellectual or super learned like theology, or a super, or even a more sophisticated apologetics that they could bring to their preaching. So again, it's just going to be very much shooting from the hip, trying to make people feel encouraged. And so I think that actually manifests in a way more prosperity gospel forward practice in these churches. And I just analyzed that real time. I've never, as y'all can tell, that was not scripted. But yeah, that's what I think is going on. My one black friend, do you have closing thoughts for us today?
I do. And Sumami has written Mope preparing himself for fatherhood with dad jokes. I see.
Nice.
Yes, Sumami, my cheese baby will be happy to know that I've been thinking of her long before she was even born, trying to prepare my comedy routines to stop her from crying when she feels free to do so. But yeah, this has been a really good episode. I am seeing so many new names in the chat, and that's very encouraging. So thank you all for joining us and tuning in, regardless of which stream funneled you here. We'd certainly appreciate it. And Liz Allen, I will likely be borrowing your comment, "It don't work" ethic, because that is comedy gold. My baby, my cheese baby, will hear about that once she's born at some point, I'm sure. But that's it. How about you, Pocket Locker?
First off, I just want some credit for the find, y'all. Fox Soul. I mean, Fox Soul. Who even knew that Fox had a little coon cubby, I want to call it.
Do they have an AI Don Cornelius announcing the show? Welcome.
Fox Soul, yeah, and you know they're covering the Jasmine Crockett thing and all this other stuff. So I think that was a real find, and I also just think it speaks to the way Black Christians really are not ready to handle atheism, and the way you can see that even people that are hip to it are primed to like just fumble their way through it and mess it up, because I honestly think it's a big deal. I think so many Black people they're committed to being Christians for life. It's super central to their identity, and so I actually wonder if many of them are even capable of having honest conversations. I kind of think it's way easier if they're starting to have their own doubt. I don't know why, I don't know what causes it, but I think if something is priming them, if they're already questioning, if they're already having issues, if they're already struggling with their faith to some regard, I think it's a lot easier. But yeah, otherwise, I think you just got to be careful and definitely have the conversations when you can. And also recognize that when you have conversations with people and those conversations are difficult, it may be because they've been primed like this. It may be because they've seen other conversations on the internet or heard something from the pulpit that is sort of giving them a problematic talking point. And you may use that as an opportunity to actually, show them some more compassion, because they may just, that may be all they've been exposed to so far. Yeah. But yeah, otherwise it's great seeing y'all. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate everybody spending time here. There are links in the descriptions if you want to show some support and all that good stuff. Also, there are links in the description for the co-host and a bunch of the mods. In particular, want to remind everybody that we're trying to show some love and support to Bree. Bree's also helped me recently with the thumbnails on my podcast and stuff like that. And so there's a link in the description to show Bree some support. Also for Stephanie and the transposition. So their links are all down there in the description. We'll be hanging out and Gather. Michael, we'll have to get you in Gather. We'll have to get you affiliated with the crew where we hang out offline. But yeah, it's like our virtual headquarters. There's a link in the description for that as well. Yeah, we'll see y'all next time. Appreciate it. As always, be good to yourselves
and each other.
To the Gather round table we go.
To the truck I go.